weren't that much people who welcomed him.
Presidential aspirant Manny Pacquiao takes his campaign to Nueva Ecija today.
Aksyon Demokratiko standard bearer Isko Moreno is now in Cagayan Valley.
He clarified his now viral photo of him doing the 2 joints hand sign.
This is not drugs. Huh? This is 2 joints. Diba? 2 joints. Drugs ba yun? Okay daw. Isko, Dokwili. Ito pa isa. Yorme, Ong. Pwede? Chill. Don't panic. It's organic.
Senatorial candidate Attorney Luke Espiritu admits that he didn't expect to go trending over his performance at the recent SMNI senatorial debates.
Bitin eh. Ayoko naman kasing lumabas lang na personahe na anti-Marcos lang tayo. Hindi lang tayo dapat personality politics. Dapat we go into the root of the matter.
Tonight we conduct more interviews with 2 candidates aspiring for a seat in the Senate. What are their plans and platforms, and how will they act on their intentions for a better Philippines? We discuss in this episode of Face the Chiefs. It's a double header for us tonight on the show. We will start with former Agriculture Chief Manny Pinol to talk more about agriculture, of course, and food security issues, and his plans for elections. And later, labor lawyer attorney Luke Espiritu discusses his 4-cornered check platform. Stay tuned. We will be joined by the other chiefs when we return. Welcome to the Chiefs. I'm Robbie Alampay, and with us online, Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5, and Ed Lingao of One News. Chiefs, happy Friday.
Happy weekend.
Happy guys.
Happy
weekend.
Dalawang guest natin
Ed's
ngayon.
favorite day.
And alam naman natin, Wednesdays and Fridays, we talk with candidates. We'll jump straight into it, pero very quickly lang, Ami, ano bang mga headlines natin bukas?
Nag-emergency meeting sila Secretary Cusi dahil nga lalong lumalala yung posisyon doon sa Ukraine. And wala pang masyadong detalye, pero I think they're thinking of more discounts for the affected sectors dahil 120 na nga per barrel.
Okay. Sige. Anyway, these are things obviously that we may want to ask our candidates later. Let's get into it. Let's first of all, joining us is former Agriculture Secretary and Mindanao Development Authority Chief Manny Pinol, who is now running for the Senate. Good evening, Secretary Pinol. Welcome back, sir.
Robby, magandang gabi sir.
Hi, sir.
Ami, kamusta kayo?
Sir, let's start with the recent senatorial debates, not for anything, but naiintindihan naman lahat ng tao. I think both the candidates as well as the people are frustrated pagka may debates kasi limited naman talaga, di ba? We're all limited by the formats. If it were up to you, sir, and if you had all the time, and you have about 30 minutes now with us, what would you like to discuss?
Well, actually, kahapon, after the debate, I was interviewed by the crew of SMNI. And pinasalamatan ko sila doon sa opportunity of being able to join the debate. But at the same time, I expressed my frustration over the fact that in the almost 4 hours na debate, it was only during my opening statement and my closing statement that agriculture, food security, and our food supply was discussed. And but I don't take it against anybody. Kasi para sa akin, symptomatic ito ng mindset ng ating bansa na parang hindi binabaliwala natin yung issue ng food security. In fact, before I opened my phone to join you today, pinakuha ko sa staff ko yung distribution ng pondo ng gobyerno according to departments. For 2022, ang pinakamalaking budget goes to the Department of Public Works and Highways. It's 788 billion. Sumunod, Department of Health, 206. Sorry. Let me, education pala.
Education.
788 billion. And then followed by DPWH, 786. DOH, 268. And where's agriculture? Agriculture is number 7. Pero sinama sa kanya yung at 102. Pero sinama sa kanya yung budget ng irrigation. While irrigation is not under DA, sinama doon sa agriculture. So effectively, ang tingin ko ang budget ng agriculture is about 70 billion. Now, bakit ganito ang ating pananaw sa food security? Alam mo, palagi nila sinasabi, gumagastos tayo sa agriculture, napakalaki na ng investment natin, hindi nagpe-perform yung mga farmers natin. If that is a logic that they carry actually, I would also apply that to the logic. Bakit? May bumabalik ba sa atin pag gumastos tayo sa education? May bumabalik ba sa atin pag gumastos tayo sa national defense? Is there an ROI? No. But in the case of agriculture, if we invest in agriculture, we produce food for this country. And the pandemic actually and the raging war right now in Ukraine are lessons that we must not ignore in as far as food security is concerned. What do I mean by that? Global food supply chain, if we are dependent on importation, could be disrupted by a crisis like a pandemic like COVID-19 or a war like the one going on in Ukraine and Russia right now. So ang aking sinasabi, baguhin natin yung ating pananaw. Let's put agriculture at least in the top 3. Why? Because maski mataas yung budget sa education, kung gutom yung mga bata na pumapasok, did you know that daily 95 Filipino children die of malnutrition and nobody talks about it? No? Walang nagkikiri ng story na yon. And the secret to solving that problem is a nutrition-based food production program. Of course, you have to fund it. Number 2, yung public works and highways, pangalawa sa budget. Walang kalsada. Mabubuhay naman yung tao, pero pag walang pagkain, hindi mabubuhay yung tao. So para sa akin, I may sound simplistic, but you look back in the history of mankind and you will find out that any nation had always looked at food production, food supply, as the backbone and the foundation of governance.
Is there
Secretary,
is there a rule of thumb or an international standard for spending on food security? I mean, if you were to put a percentage to what we're spending now, is there an ideal number that we should be targeting?
For so many years, Robbie, actually ang agriculture sa bansa natin, and this goes back to the previous administrations, not only now. In fact, mas mataas na ngayon, no? But historically, ang allocation for agriculture hovers between 2% to 1.5%. The ideal should be about 5 to 6% of the total national budget. So ang ibig sabihin, 5% of 5 trillion would give you an estimated budget for agriculture. And ang pangalawa nating dapat baguhin, that's why I decided to run for the Senate actually. Kasi nakita ko yung listahan ng mga tumatakbo. I don't want to belittle anybody's understanding of agriculture or food security. But let's face this, I'm the only farmer running for the Senate right now. And I have a profound understanding of agriculture and how to address this. Ang problema lang, ang nakabangga ako when I was Secretary of Agriculture, which prevented me from doing the things I wanted to do, were the very people who were holding the purse, the economic managers. And even when I asked for budget for rice sufficiency program, they did not approve it. In fact, meron nga akong naikasa na 40 billion na utang from Israel. It's a concessional loan actually, 40 billion. And I sought the approval of the president. That's for solar-powered irrigation, which would have irrigated the bantas. Andyan pa sa ICC at natutulog for the past 3 years. So ito yung mindset. Kasi ang problema ko, hindi pa rin nila maintindihan na ang food security, ang agricultural programs actually, Robbie, is intergenerational. That's why I was explaining during the term of the president. But that's the nature of agriculture. Kapag nagtanim ka ng niyog ngayon, 6 na taon pa bago ma-harvest. So
Yes,
it exceeds the political term of the president. At isa pang problema natin yan, masyadong politicized yung ating mga development programs. Sa taon in agriculture, ha? But yung ating mga development programs palaging nakatali sa political terms ng ating mga presidente, gobernador, mayor, the people who implement the programs. And that's why in the list of legislative agenda that I have already prepared, just in case, if by God's grace, I would win, actually are programs that would span 10 years with automatic appropriation sapagkat sa experience ko, ang nagiging problema natin sa bansang ito, kapag nagpalit tayo ng presidente, maski maganda pa yung programa, binabago ng susunod na presidente and he wants to stamp his name on the program, no?
Yes, sir. Sir, well,
So dapat yan, ang solusyon dyan is to copy what the US is doing,
Yes, sir.
which is come up with a 10-year Farm Act na automatic yung appropriation para hindi mababago maski sino ang presidente.
yeah, well, sir,
Now-
sir, all very
Yes.
good arguments, sir. We understand. Pero you also held the agriculture portfolio for so many years. And during that time as well, parati namang nangyayari na gano'n eh. Ang budgeting, ang DepEd parating number 1, DPWH number 2, and usually DND number 3. In other words, what I'm saying is that in all those years that you held the portfolio of agriculture, you had a chance to convince your principal, which is the president, of the priorities in government. But now you're running for the Senate, where you will be one voice out of 24.
Actually, Ed, totoo yan, no? In fact, isa yun sa mga frustrations ko. Kasi si Presidente actually was supportive of me and agriculture. In fact, in several cabinet meetings, he would ask me, magkano kailangan mo, para ma-improve ang agriculture? Sabi ko, sir, kung mabibigyan nyo kami ng mga 200 billion every year, that would be good for us. No? Sige, sabi niya, sige, Sani, bigyan mo si Manny ng budget na kanyan. So kami naman, parang mga loko, based on the instructions of the President, pinatawag namin yung National Agricultural Fisheries Management Council, which is the advisory body of the DA, and we presented to them programs that would correspond to the commitment of the President, which was in 2018, 200 billion, 300 billion, and then we prepared our budget proposal. Pero pagdating sa DBCC, which is the gauntlet through which you through, no? Yun yung Development Budget Coordinating Committee, Council, no? Wala, pinagtatagpas yung aming mga budget, maiiwanan kami ng 50 billion. So, alam mo, pag gano'n ang mindset ng ating mga economic managers, talagang walang mangyayari sa agriculture. And nakita ko yung problema, Ed, no? Even a cabinet secretary like me could not actually go against the wishes of a very powerful group like the economic managers. And so, ang nakita ko na lang, because I witnessed this with my own 2 eyes, yung tawagin na natin coercive power ng isang senador na pwede niyang i-influence actually yung polisiya, yung legislation, and even the budgeting process. And that's why I decided, in response to the request of agricultural stakeholders, who also had been complaining against the pro-importation policies, especially the rice tariffication law. In response to the request, I decided to leave my job as Secretary of the Mindanao Development Authority, which would have assured me of a security of tenure until 2025. And I decided to file my certificate of candidacy on October 8 of this year.
Nabanggit nyo na rin lang yung importation. Merong debate ngayon kung mag-import tayo ng asukal. And even before the attack of Russia on Ukraine, may problema na dun sa presyo ng harina, kaya nagtaasa ng presyo ng tinapay sa noodles. Kung kayo nakaupo pa, halimbawa, or if you are if you had the power to legislate, ano ba ang dapat na response doon sa mga nagtataasa na presyo niya?
Actually, maraming naniniwala na I'm against importation. No, I'm not. No. Ang aking position is, let's import only the quantity that we need to fill up the supply gap. Yun na naman ang akin. Yun ang pinag-awayan namin actually sa rice tarification. Kasi sabi ko, huwag nating bahain yung merkado ng imported na bigas kasi tatamaan yung farmers natin. In the same manner, I will oppose any importation in excess of what is needed by the sugar industry or the sugar sector. No? So, walang problema yung importation, but let's keep it at a volume na hindi mo masagasaan yung local producers. And at the same time, if you want to achieve food sufficiency, you have to support your local producers so that may natin yung level na komportable tayo. Alam mo kasi, napaka-delicate ng ating situation. No? Nakita na natin sa COVID pandemic na for a while, hinawakan ng Vietnam yung kanilang supply ng bigas. Sabi nila, teka muna, hindi mo na kami mag-export. So, if you are dependent on importation, and if you don't produce enough rice for your people, or at least at a level na pwede ka makarecover right away, talagang magkakaproblema ka. And this was what happened actually to Venezuela, to Haiti. Yung Venezuela, if I will be given a chance to explain that, no, was one of the richest countries in South America. Ang dami na lang langis. So, because they had so many money, they had so much money, sabi nila, wag na pabayaan natin yung agriculture sector. Let's just import. Anyway, marami tayong pera. Bumagsak yung kanilang oil industry. Ayun, naglilikasan yung mga Venezuelans to the nearby countries to find food. And this is what I would not like to happen to my country. Being dependent on importation when we have the comparative advantage of producing our own food.
Paano yung sa wheat? Wala naman tayong alternative. Or do you have any idea kung anong pwedeng alternative? Kasi because of Russia is affecting the wheat supply worldwide. Kahit hindi naman tayo malaking importer ng wheat nila, no? Pero naapektuhan talaga.
Yes, of course. Understandably, Ami, no? Because while we do not import directly from Russia, kapag naapektuhan yung supply ng Russia at hindi makaabot sa world market, tataas yung presyo kasi magkakaroon ng shortage. So, maski galing pa ng US or Argentina yung ating wheat, talagang tataas yung presyo at maapektuhan tayo indirectly. So, yun yung problema natin kasi we don't grow wheat really in the country. Yan ang isang bagay na hindi natin napapasukan pa. But of course, there are other alternatives in making bread, but they don't actually go up to that level of quality that bread made out of wheat actually offers.
Aside from, if you become senator, aside from increasing the budget for agriculture, what other legal measures do you think we should actually come up with to finally make a permanent change in the agriculture system that we have now that is so dependent on subsidies for farmers, but over the years, the competitiveness of our farmers has not increased despite the so-called subsidies that have been given to them, despite the Agrarian reform program that's supposed to strengthen their position. What is it that we have not yet done as far as legislative measures are concerned to improve the lot of farmers and to finally make them competitive and to, of course, to increase our food security stability?
Well, if I will be given the chance of really reforming agriculture, I will start with the forest, Luchi. Why? Naiwan sa atin, 6% na lang ng forest cover natin. You have to understand that water comes from the forest. And ang aking unang proposal is to create an authority kasi hindi na kaya ng DNR. Flowed yung reforestation program ng DNR. It should be a whole nation approach, no? To be handled by an authority, a multi-agency authority na mag-handle ng ating reforestation program. And it should not just be concerned with environmental protection. it should also be offer economic returns. So meron akong ginawa na programa dito and in-implement ko to sa MIMDA actually when I was chairman. Because you have to understand, noong sa DA, yung tree planting naman, hindi naman kasama sa DA function yun eh. But when I was with MIMDA, actually mas lumawak yung aking coverage. No? The second reform, and this will serve as the foundation of a reformed agriculture in the Philippines, sustainable at saka long-term. No? The second reform would be organizing or establishing a national water conservation and management authority. Ito yung problema natin, Lucy, na hindi natin binibigyan ng pansin. When the water crisis occurred in Manila about 3 years ago, nagkaroon ng emergency meeting. No? So I was telling them, hey, bakit natin hindi pasukin yung paggawa ng mga mini dams, catchment basins, water conservation? And for a while, mainit yung issue. Nung nag-umulan, nakakalimutan na naman. So, yan ang problema natin sa gobyernong ito. Madali tayo makalimot. No? Meron tayong automatic amnesia. So, water conservation is very important. You're talking about competitiveness in the context of comparing the price of our agricultural products and fisheries products to Vietnam and Thailand. It could not be compared because of the fact that our country is a geographically fragmented country. Alam mo ba na yung pag-transport mo pa lang ng saging from Davao to Manila, mas mahal kaysa mag-ship kami ng Cavendish from Davao to Japan? Ganon ang problema natin kasi ang reality is that yung presyo ng pagkain, yung food supply actually is not the problem. The farmers could produce it. Pero magkano mo bibilhin? Paano mo dadalhin?
So bakit forest? Anong connection ng forest and increasing the water
forest
supply?
Is where the water comes from. Without water, you don't have agriculture. It's as simple as that. Everything starts with the forest.
Secretary.
Galing sa gubat yung tubig natin. Pag wala kang tubig, wala kang irrigation. No irrigation, no agriculture. Isa pang problema natin yan. Alam nyo ba na mahigit kalahati ng ating rice farms in the country are not covered with irrigation, and without irrigation you could only produce once a year, and that's the reason why we could not achieve rice sufficiency. Okay. And sinasabi ko nga sa kanila, buksan natin yung solar powered irrigation system. Inumpisahan ko na. We built the prototypes, we built the model. I was able to convince Israel to lend us 40 billion for solar powered irrigation systems. Modern, ang tawag nila is fertigation. Kasi with the irrigation water comes fertilizer. Ganun ka modern at saka interconnected by computer, no? Pero andun, 3 taon na sa NEDA ICC natutulog pa rin. Hindi pa nila inaaksyonan yung offer ng Israel na pahiramin tayo ng 40 billion including the technology transfer to build more solar powered irrigation systems in the country. And so ito yung mga bagay-bagay, Lucy, na nagpapabagal sa ano. Because you have to understand, yung sinasabi nila, 3 taon ka sa Department of Agriculture, what were you able to do? Well, modesty aside, during my term as Secretary of Agriculture in 2017, we posted the highest growth in agriculture over so many decades, 3.9, almost 4%. The following year, although tinamaan tayo ng bagyo at marami pang mga calamities, we still were able to post a positive growth. Look at the performance of agriculture right now, it's in the negative. Hindi ko sinasabing mas magaling ako. But maybe we were just pushing the right buttons, like endorsing with the rice seeds, which actually is credited to that historic high harvest of 19.28 million metric tons in 2017 and another 19 million metric tons in 2018. Ito yung gusto kong maintindihan sana ng mga tao na hindi mo pwedeng baguhin yung agriculture in just 3 years. Kaya sinasabi ko nga, it should be a sustained program. It should be intergenerational. The mindset should not be how to provide food in the table of Filipinos today, tomorrow, next month. It should be next generation.
Speaking of which, Secretary, intergenerational, kanina nabanggit ni Luchi, agrarian reform. 3.5 dekada na po na simula nang nailunsad ang Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program na extend and so on. I just want to ask you, where does that fit in your plans and in your vision? Agrarian reform on the one hand, sinasabi ng mga tao, that still needs to address a very basic structural problem in our country, land ownership and so on. On the other hand, meron din mga nagsasabi na it has proven itself incompatible with any vision for industrializing agriculture. Where do you stand on agrarian reform at this point, sir?
Now, we have to understand two things here, Robbie. No? Yung industrializing agriculture. Alam mo, pag sinabi mong industrialized agriculture, you're talking of plantations, big lands, and so on and so forth. But right now, the reality is that hindi pwede sa Pilipinas yun. Kasi dumadami yung ating mga maliliit na farmers. No? And basically, it's small land holdings right now. But that does not mean that hindi tayo pwede maging successful. There are models of tinatawag lang corporate farming involving individual farmers. But you have to introduce to them a common product to grow and a market to sell. So yun yung absent doon sa component doon sa agrarian reform. And even Secretary John Castricion is also running for the Senate right now, admits that that is one of the biggest problems of the agrarian reform program. Actually, kakulangan ng support services, kakulangan ng guidance on what the farmers should plant. But because, alam mo, kung napupunta kayo sa bandang Quezon, makikita ninyo na sa ilalim ng mga puno ng niyog, nakatiwangwang lang yung mga lupa, walang nakatanim. You know, this could be planted to other crops. Pero ang magiging tanong dyan na sasalubong sa'yo anong itatanim namin? Kanino namin ibabenta? Magkano presyo? So ito yung problema ng agriculture natin sa Pilipinas because basically, the government actually has taken a hands-off policy doon sa tinatawag nating the after-production role of government. Which is why nasasayangan ako sa NFA kasi nag-focus lang ito sa rice at nasasayangan din ako dahil it was emasculated by the rice tariffication law. The NFA actually could function as a marketing agency of the government, not only for local food redistribution and repositioning, but also for exports. Tayo lang ang bansa sa Southeast Asia na walang ahensya ng gobyerno na tumutulong sa kanyang mga magsasaka at mangingisda para makahanap ng export market. Vietnam has VINA for its rice. India has its agency for the marketing of the Indian buffalo meat. And sila yung naghahanap ng merkado. Sa atin dito, yung mga banana producers natin sa Mindanao, bahala kayo maghanap ng produkto ang babentahan nyo. Yung durian farmers, sila mismo nakikipag-negotiate. Kaya nangyayari, talagang kawawa sila doon sa mga bumibili na kinokontrol yung presyo. Now, that is also related to why our food is expensive. And in the words of Lucci kanina, not competitive. Actually, very competitive yung ating mga farmers. Did you know that kalabasa in Sultan Kudarat is only bought for 3 pesos per kilo? Now, sasabihin niyo, ang mura. Yes. Not only that, at this point, na bukas na yung fishing season sa Zamboanga, ang presyo ng tamban sa Zamboanga is between 3 pesos to 5 pesos per kilo. Sasabihin niyo, teka muna, bakit ganun kamura? Ba't hindi umaabot sa Manila? Because walang private sector na nag-i-invest in the redistribution of food because it's very expensive. That's why one of the reforms that I will introduce, should I be given the opportunity of serving as senator, is to amend the mandate of the Food Terminal Incorporated. Kailangan talagang pakialaman ng gobyerno yung food procurement, basic commodities at least, isda, manok, gulay, the basic things that the family needs, no? And redistribute this in the country because our problem in the Philippines is not the lack of food but the very poor positioning of food. And the perfect example of that is the kamatis of Nueva Vizcaya and the gulay of Cordillera. Sabi nila may oversupply. No. In fact, we're even importing. Kanya lang, paano dadali nung magkakamatis yung kanyang kamatis sa Bicol na 10 piso lang yung presyo ng kamatis niya, ita-transport niya ng napakalayo.
Secretary Pinol.
Pagdating doon, bubong ng kamatis.
Apa, Secretary Pinol, pasensya na po. I'll have to, because we have another guest that's waiting, but we still have about 30 seconds for you to have your final message to our viewers.
Well, number one, I have prepared already what I call immediate legislative measures. One would be the amendment of the rice tariffication law, which made life difficult for rice farmers, especially now that the price of fertilizer has tripled. Number two, we reform the marketing system. Government must get into the action. Number three, we must change this mindset of reliance on importation. And as I've said, let's come up with a food production program that is nutrition-based, because if we are able to do this, we could even reduce the budget for the Department of Health, because we will be nourishing healthy people. Thank you very much.
Secretary Pinol, maraming salamat po.
Thank
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Former Agriculture Secretary Manny Pinol, number 52 po sa balota ninyo. Tumatakbo po NPC under the tandem of Lacson and Soto. Maraming salamat po. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Welcome back to Chiefs on One News, and now joining us is Attorney Luke Espiritu, the former president of the BNP, the Bakluran ng Manggagawang Pilipino, who is now aspiring for the Senate under the Partido Lakas ng Masa. Attorney Espiritu, magandang gabi po and welcome to the Chiefs.
Ay,
Good evening, Attorney.
Magandang gabi po.
Hi, sir. Thank you for joining us. Sir, I suppose it's fair to say that a lot of us were entranced by by the statements that you made in the last debate. Unfortunately, not everybody gets to watch those debates, and a lot of people probably never will. How would you describe yourself to the voter who is seeing you for the first time? Ano ang pinaglalaban ni Labor Leader Attorney Luke Espiritu?
Yes po. As a labor leader, that pretty much tells a lot about my stance. Pati ang aking platform, labor first. I subscribe to the platform of our presidential candidate, Calio Didi Guzman. And I would like to correct pala dun introduction. I'm still currently the president of Pluran ng Manggagawang Pilipino. I know it came from a news report, I think, that described me as the former, because they may have assumed that since I run for public office, I no longer am. I just took a leave of absence from my functions as president. And Calio is our chairperson of the Pluran ng Manggagawang Pilipino.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So we belong to the same organization.
Yes, sir. Go on, sir. You're talking about reforms in the labor sector, contractualization. Actually, ang dami yan eh.
Yes, if you want me to describe it, definitely gusto natin ng genuine security of tenure law, which entails na ang mga manpower agency ay ipagbawal na natin, and yung employment ay dapat direct hired para ang mga manggagawa regular doon sa kanilang pinagtatrabahoan, yung so-called principal. And secondly, pinaglalaban natin ang 750 national minimum wage for all regions. So ibig sabihin, dapat alisin na natin ang distinction sa mga regions. That also will entail yung pagbubuwag na ng mga regional wage boards.
Parang across the board.
And those are two of the principal pieces of legislation na gusto sana nating maitaguyod pagka tayo ay pinalad sa Senado. Of course, that's not the only thing, but if I have to describe everything, medyo baka maubawasan tayo ng oras.
Attorney, pinag-uusapan kayo ngayon sa social media.
Yes, Ma'am
Kayo
Lucy.
dahil nakilala kayo dahil dun sa SMNI debate, no?
So, huwag kang bastos.
Yun na nga, nakipagbakan kayo kila Attorney Gadon. But, I'm reading our research material now. So you've lived quite a privileged life, no? You were a graduate of La Salle, Bacolod, Ateneo de Manila. I mean, these are expensive schools, no? Can you tell us a little bit about, how you got into, sabihin na natin, an NGO and even an activist
Yes.
gagawa ng Pilipinas?
Yes, Ma'am Lucy. Although I did not live a privileged life, my father was a lawyer that would qualify us as middle class. But then, yung father ko will have to raise 7 children and hindi naman ganun kadali yun. 7 kami and I was the youngest. And sufficient lang din for us to go to private schools. Sufficient lang din para makapasok ako sa mga schools na yan. But definitely we're not wealthy. And ako mismo ang lifestyle ay hindi naman privileged.
Paano ka napasok sa militant org? Curious lang. I mean, from Ateneo to a militant organization like BMP.
Yes, I was born during the Marcos era. So sa akin talaga natural yung pagiging politicized na. I was born in the Marcos era. Growing up, alam ko yung mga nangyayari. Kasi nasa Negros kami. Isa sa mga hotbed ng anti-Marcos struggle ang Negros eh. And ang mga pari doon ay they are believers of liberation theology. So pagka nagsisimba ako, naririnig ko na yung mga human rights violation. And hindi lang yan something na malayo sa'yo kasi ang kapitbahay naming madre ay pinatay yun ng mga militar. Tapos ang tatay ko pa, naging lawyer siya ng mga pinatay ng mga tenant farmers ng isang warlord sa Kabangkalan. At ito yung case kung saan 3 pari rin ang kinulong ng Marcos regime. Si Father Gore, si Father O'Brien. Growing up, alam mo na masama ang extrajudicial killing, masama ang martial law, masama ang diktadurya, masama ang human rights violations. So politicized ka na noon, nung time na yon. Pero nung lumaki ako, pagdating ko sa Ateneo, medyo humupa yung activismo noong 1990s. But I was at heart really an activist. So parang it's some kind of a hindi naman hidden na motivation sa akin na maging aktivista pero wala naman akong outlet. I really became an activist when I was already a lawyer because that gave me the free time to really choose my path. So it started during the presidency of Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, the anti-Gloria movement. Until I was like I was so-called discovered by San Lakas activists, and that's how I started.
So martial law baby ka, anong masasabi mo ngayon? Mukhang nakalimutan na ng Pilipinas yung mga kinikwento mo ngayon na mga masasamang nangyari nung panahon ng martial law. Ano nakikita mo and what do you think can be the remedies to this? Nagkakaroon na tayo ng amnesia, no?
Oo nga po, Mamami, kasi I would not have imagined growing up during that time, especially yung euphoric feeling nung time na nawala na si Marcos. I would have not imagined na magkakaroon ng Marcos restoration. And several decades after, we'll be talking still about Marcos dahil babalik na naman ang alaala nun. In fact, yan yung basis ng campaign ni Bongbong Marcos na golden era yun. I pretty much know that it is not the golden years. And the reason why ganyan, hindi naman talaga na nagkaroon ng pagbabago sa sistema kung saan mapipigilan natin ang restoration ni Marcos. So, meron tayong historical revisionism right now. Now, the way to challenge that is to make a principled stand for the truth. For a while, I'm sorry about that. For the truth at principle, meaning to say, you can only talk truth to power. Kung hindi tayo maging principled sa katotohanan, talagang mananaig ang falsehood. Parati kong ang kinikwento, during that time in the SMNI debate, marami namang nag-tweet na mga supporters ni Bongbong Marcos based on sa mga sagot ko sa mga tanong, maraming nag-express na they root for me. Pero Bongbong supporters sila. But when that incident happened between me and Larry Gadon and Harry Roque, binawi na nila, ayaw na nila doon. So imagine mo, senatorial candidate ako, pwede naman akong hindi umatake Hindi naman presidente ang tinatakbuhan ko pwede ko sabihin, hindi ko atakein si Bongbong para makakuha ko ng Bongbong Marcos support. Pero kapag magpakatrapo tayong ganyan, talagang unprincipled na yan. Hindi kaya ng konsensya ko yun.
But Mr. Espiritu, I follow up ko lang kay Ami, na parang ito kailangan gawin, ito pa rin yung kailangan panindigan. But I still want to know, what's your take on whether we like it or not, nandito na tayo sa puntong to. The front runner is a Marcos. Diba? What does that mean for you? And what does that mean for our generation, for your generation, leading the next generation to basically an elections where, as we put it, the front runner is a Marcos. What does that mean for the past 36 years?
Firstly, I do believe na yung support ni Bongbong Marcos ay it comes from the dissatisfaction and disillusion ng marami sa liberal bourgeoisie, sa elite rule in general, and as represented by the liberal bourgeoisie. Dissatisfied sila, desperado sila. Pero ang ating dichotomy kasi sa ating politika sa matagal na panahon, it's the battle between the good liberal bourgeoisie or the other faction of the bourgeoisie na mas authoritarian. Since ganun lang ang dichotomy natin, kapag magre-react ka sa dissatisfaction mo sa rule sa liberal bourgeoisie, talagang hahatakin ka nun other faction of the bourgeoisie which is more inclined towards authoritarian rule. False dichotomy yun kasi parehas lang silang burgis, at ang dissatisfaction natin ng masang Pilipino, ng majority, ay dapat directed towards the entire elite rule. Kaya kapag walang tunay na alternatiba na makalabas sa box na yon, sa trap na yon, walang tunay na alternatiba na sasabihin sa mga masang Pilipino na ang source ng kahirapan ninyo ay hindi actually yung rule ng yellow, at ang magiging alternative mo yung rule ng mga tulad nila Duterte at saka ni Marcos, hindi sila ang alternative. Ang alternative ay you stand for yourself, ang interest ng iyong uri. Kaya nga ang aming tinitindigan ay manggagawa naman na ang solusyon sa kahirapan ay you stand for those that are in the bottom of our social order. Kailangan we stand for the workers, interest ng workers, sa interest ng farmers, interest ng urban poor, sa interest ng mga naghahanap buhay lamang pero hindi sila pinapayagan na maging malaya ang paghahanap buhay nila, pinoproteksyonan ang hanap buhay nila. Yun dapat ang alternative. Pero wala pang nakikita ang masang Pilipino dahil nandun pa sila sa trap na dalawa lang yung alternatibo parate.
Yeah.
If you react against one side, then it's automatic for them that you go for the other side. And the other side will also, like for example, Bongbong Marcos knows that, na desperado ang lahat. Duterte knows that, na desperado ang lahat. That's why when they attack the yellows, they will co-opt an anti-oligarchic discourse. So magsasabi rin sila, alam mo, mga oligarchs kasi yan so it finds resonance sa mga masa. Oo nga, oligarchs yan, mayayaman yan concealing the fact that they are also oligarchs.
Yeah.
Marcos himself was an oligarch, but he also used that anti-oligarch discourse, the Ferdinand Marcosinho, but he created his own oligarch in the cronies.
Pero sir, unfortunately, the reality is that, and of course you know this already, the reality is that for any meaningful changes to occur, number one, you have to get power, and number two, you have to stay in power long enough to enact those reforms. So I'll go first to number one. How do you intend to change the patterns that we are seeing now in the surveys?
Now, I'm a member of the mass movement. Therefore, I do not really subscribe to the view that is limited to what an individual can be capable of. That is, if you look at yourself merely as an individual, then you have to take power and be able to preserve that power. But I'm from the mass movement. For me, it is for the masses of workers and the masses of Filipinos to be able to have political weight in our society, and that means they have to unite. and they have to be very, very conscious about their class interest, and for them to unite and become a political force. And it's only then that their mass leaders can become their representatives sa needed changes. Therefore, electoral politics is just one arena for us. But the very basic solution really is for the mass movement to gain strength. And it's secondary kung ito man gain strength, pag nag-gain strength sila, it will be reflected sa public office.
How do you get out of that political trap, as you call it, where yung masang Pilipino that you say you represent, no, are trapped between the two poles, okay, the authoritative and the liberal bourgeoisie, and we know for a fact that in the surveys, many of these masang Pilipino voting for either pole. Let's just put it that way. How do you get out of that political trap by running for office? Is this a new tack, or not that it's the first time that activists like you have run, no? But is this a new strategy for your movement, your mass movement, in order to gain mass support? Is that a way out of a trap?
Yes, you're correct, Ma'am Lucy. That's actually what we're trying to do. The first step would be dapat we don't fall into tailisan, bumubuntot lang. Dahil may support, dahil nandito tayo sa trap na to, isang paksyon, kung hindi ka sumusuporta doon ka sa ibang paksyon. Ang problem sa atin, ang problem sa mga mass leaders natin, mga nandun sa mass movement, nahahatak din sila ng ganitong mga choices. So they will also ally themselves with, parang we feel we have no choice but to ally ourselves with one or the other faction. Now, the first step really is to reject that type of a narrative and create a new narrative. Huwag kang magbuntot dun sa mga ruling classes na ito. You have to chart the independent politics of the workers, and for the workers to lead the democratic struggle. That's basically the strategy that we are pursuing right now. That's why you're correct, Ma'am Lucy, that part of that is sa politikang ito, pang-politing diskursong ito, imarka ang independent line ng mga workers. That's why we run during these elections. At it's a bold strategy, and we already have seen the results. People responded. Kahit na sabihin mo mga surveys namin ay mababa, ako isa sa pinakamababa na senator. Si Calyodi, mababa dun sa mga presidential aspirants. Si Kawalben, mababa dun sa mga vice presidential aspirants. But when we speak, people respond. Bakit? Because we just articulate what everybody else feels. So it's the first time na may ganon. Mga labor leaders nakikipag-engage, nakikipagbakbakan sa mga representatives of the political clans, mga trapos, mga tatagal na mga politiko, natatagal na nandyan sa public office na yan. Nakikipagbakbakan and they respond. That's the reason why naging viral yung aking pakikipagbakbakan, kanila Gadon at saka kanila ni Harry Roque. It's not because of me. It's because millions of others felt that what I articulated is the same thing that they really believed and felt. So there is really a strong and a real anti-trapo sentiment among majority of our people. Ang problem lang, hindi pa nila nakikita ang way out of it. Pero if we redirect that to the right path, na makawala na tayo dito sa trapo control na to, then malaking bagay yun. And we're starting right now.
Let's assume...
Attorney, nag-umpisa yung OFW phenomenon ng panahon ni Marcos. And yung isang criticism sa grupo ninyo, coming from the employers, siyempre, medyo anti-investment daw kayo, saka medyo unrealistic daw yung iba niyong programa to promote labor. Ano yung masasabi niyo sa ganon? Saka ano ba yung, halimbawa manalo kayo, ano yung legislative agenda niyo to create jobs, job generation?
Now, there are, ang problem sa mga business-minded people or those who articulate the interest only of capital, they articulate it exclusively in terms of capital. Lahat ng mga problema nila, they're dumping it on labor. But we know for a fact na yung ating investment climate ay hindi naging maganda dahil sa pulisiya din mismo ng mga Marcoses, sa economic crisis na created nila. Hindi dahil sa mga manggagawa, But when they say na when they try to engage with the workers, sasabihin nila kasi ang labor movement magulo. Wow, o ganun ba kalakas nun yung labor movement na pwedeng palayasin sila? Of course not. We are not anti-investment. We are for the protection of the workers. Now, hindi naman pwede na nag-invest ka tapos pababayaan mo ang iyong manggagawa. Like for example right now, yung tinanong niyo Ma'am Ami, ano ba ang pwede nating gagawing actually, tinanong sa akin yan balansehin mo naman ang interest ng business at saka ng worker. But in a condition na hindi na siya balansyado to begin with, the way to balance it is to assert the rights of the workers. Hindi balansyado talaga ngayon Talagang, kumbaga sa weighing scale, mabigat talaga ang lahat ng proteksyon at saka lahat ng concession sa business at hindi sa worker. Bigyan ko kayo ng example. Ang wages natin below the cost of living. Under the system, sabihin natin, kahit business-friendly ka na sistema, ang talagang ideal ay binibigay mo sa worker ang cost of living niya. Para hindi naman siya mamamatay. Ang reason niyan ay bibigyan mo siya ng tamang panggastos niya sa pagkain para makapagtrabaho siya the next day. He should be able to buy his food. He should be able to feed his family. But under the present wage level, 537, talagang below cost of living yan. Okay. Yan ay aminado na mismo ang lahat. Lahat aminado, below yan sa cost of living. Because si Secretary Pernian mismo ng NEDA, sinasabi niya 42,000 ang pangangailangan ng ordinaryong manggagawa. That translates to 1,615 a day. If you get 537, that's less than 1/3 of what you get. So, in order to balance the interest of capital and labor, you have to tilt in favor of labor in this aspect para mabalansyado naman natin. Di ba? Ngayon, hindi sobra-sobra yon. Ang hinihingi natin, 750. Ang cost of living niya, 1,615. Ano yun? Discounted pag 50% yun Kasi ang formulation natin dyan, itaas muna sa 750. Tapos, ang gagalawin naman natin, yung mga polisiya na nagpapataas ng cost of living. So, hindi na natin kukunin sa mga business owner yon. Di ba? Ipababain na natin ang presyo. For example, mataas ang presyo ng ating kuryente. Dito, number 1 tayo sa Asia. Number 1 ang Pilipinas sa pinakamataas na presyo ng kuryente. So pababain mo yun para at least bumaba ang cost of living. Hindi mo na kinukuha sa business owner yon. Kinukuha mo yon sa pulisiya na magpo-protect naman sa worker. And incidentally, it will also help business. Why? Kapag mababa ang kuryente, di mababa rin yung cost of production niya kasi kuryente also forms a big part of the cost of production of the business owner. So we are trying to balance things. That's why we are tilting policy in favor of the worker kasi sobrang disbalansyado in favor of capital.
Mr. Espiritu, I do want to ask about that balance also and proof of that. Diba? Parang nabanggit nyo that first step pa lang to. First step is mamulat muna ang sambayanan that they do have an alternative beyond the establishments and the different poles in the establishment. May alternatibo na mas progresibo. But the second question of people is granting that you can get past the moral victory of awakening people and making them consider something more progressive. In the parliamentary struggle and when you get there, yun din yung concern ng mga tao. Can they engage? Can they be pragmatic? Now, even when you call the left, that is still a spectrum. But so I will just simplify it. With the progressive groups, as they have, in fact, entered the parliamentary struggle, as they have, in fact, won seats, both in the Senate and in Congress, what would you say the progressive movement has actually proven on that point of, we can be pragmatic and we can engage?
When you say we can be pragmatic, I don't actually have anything specific in mind na maging pragmatic. Does that mean compromising? Because we in the progressive movement, we don't compromise the interests of the workers, if that's what is meant by being pragmatic. We don't compromise the interests of the workers and the farmers, those that are in the bottom. Now, as I said, that's the balancing act that we actually need right now kasi sobrang disbalansyado. Now, that is the pragmatic thing to do. In fact, the pragmatic thing to do is we must give a fair deal to those that are in the bottom. Sobra-sobra, we are a highly stratified society. And the most pragmatic thing to do is to lessen the stratification. Imagine 3%, only 3% of our population own 50% of the wealth. the Philippines is the most highly stratified. Grabe ang privilege dito. Ibsan naman natin ang privilege. That's the most pragmatic thing to do. Dahil paano naman mabubuhay ang mga nasa baba? Imaginein mo sa manggagawa na lang. I'll speak for the manggagawa. If you give them 537, alam mo namang hindi sila mabubuhay, tataksan mo pa sila ng VAT at saka ng excise tax. So yung 537, hindi pa nila mapapakain sa kanilang pamilya. Kasi babayaran mo pa ang gobyerno ng tax pag bumili ka ng pagkain. Pagka ang presyo ng binili mo ay 1,000, babayad sila ng 120. And you will be surprised kung gaano ka-importante ang 120 pesos sa mga manggagawa, dagdag pagkain na yan. What is the pragmatic thing to do there? Definitely, buhayin mo naman ang manggagawa. Bigyan mo naman ng chance na mabuhay. In fact, don't you think na hindi mabuti sa ekonomiya yan when everyone else is impoverished? Kapag impoverished ang majority, kahit sa ilalim naman ng business oriented na ekonomiya, masama yun di ba? Wala kang domestic market. Pag wala kang domestic market, wala kang industrialization. Pag wala kang industrialization, ang ekonomiya natin ay ganito, rentier ang ating mga negosyo. Kumikita lamang dito ang mga businessman natin through rentier enterprises. Ano yung mga rentier enterprises na yung kumukubra lang talaga ng wealth, di ba? Papasok sila sa mga public services, sa mga highway natin, ginagawa nilang tollways, pinaprivatize nila, silang kumukolekta. Sa electricity natin, kukubra sila ng kita doon sa electricity natin. Totally wala tayong industrialization. Kaya ganito, kaya ka-underdeveloped ang Pilipinas So the pragmatic thing to do, wag na nga tayo mag-usap ng panibagong sistema Mag-usap tayo ng prevailing system. Di ba? Ang impractical thing to do, talagang paboran mo na talaga yung mga sa tuktok. Yan ang pinaka-unpragmatic thing to do. Tapos wala na talagang hope yung mga nasa laylayan.
Okay, Mr. Espiritu, we're running out of time. In fact, we're over time. But we'll give you, katulad ng kanina kay Mr. Pinol, 30 seconds for your message to the Filipino people.
Yes, I will go back to what I said at the beginning. Panahon na ng tunay na alternatiba. Huwag na tayong pumili sa dalawang paksyon lamang ng elite at magpapatuloy lamang ng elite rule. At kapag na-dissatisfy tayo kay Bongbong Marcos, balik na naman tayo sa liberal bourgeoisie. Pag na-dissatisfy tayo sa liberal bourgeoisie, balik na naman tayo sa mga tulad ni Duterte at Marcos. Panahon na ng panibagong alternatiba. Manggagawa naman.
Okay. Luke Espiritu, tumatakbo po sa pagka-senador. Sir, anong numero natin?
Number 26 po.
Number 36 po.
26.
Sorry. 26.
26.
Muntik na swertihin si 36.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, maraming salamat po. Number 26 po, Luke Espiritu, tumatakbo po sa pagka-senador. And that will be all for this edition of the CHIEFS. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez, News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.